or year-end profits, or fiscal years as a benchmark, not necessarily considering the impact of that decision-making on those who have not yet arrived. And so that is, in my argument, short-term thinking. And the best example of that is, I was very sad to hear, I don't know if you heard this a couple of weeks ago, that Exxon's profits had dropped. Did you hear this? It was a tragic moment in American capitalism. They dropped to 19 billion this last year, which was 45 billion. 2008 was their single largest, remember this? They had the single largest profit of any corporation in history last year, 2008, 2 years ago. And 45 billion in profits, you know. This last, end of 2009, they were very sad. They only made 19 billion in profits. But that benchmark, the fact that we are so geared as a society and an economy, and such a powerful economy, to these quarters, is an indicator of the short-term nature and the danger of how it is that we are thinking. So, I don't think I need to lecture you too much on where we got to. You know, we are challenged by a number of things at the present time. We are challenged by climate change. We are challenged by peak oil. You are all onto peak oil, pretty much, is that right? Are you all familiar with the construct of peak oil? Raise your hand, would you help me out here? Okay, for the rest of you, you will need some counseling on this if you did not know about this. But, you know, peak oil is the fact that we have consumed half the world's known oil resources. You know this, yes? The remainder is out there. There's some oil out there. But at our rate of consumption, it is not clear how long that will last. And the problem with peak oil is that it means that the remaining oil is harder to get. So there is plenty of oil probably at the bottom of the crack of the sea in China, up there in the polar ice caps, 20,000 feet under the polar ice caps. There's a lot of oil there. There's a lot of oil in the Alberta tar sands, just so we're willing to squeeze sand into oil and stuff it in our gas tanks after we destroy an area about the size of Lake Superior. There is oil in a lot of countries too, but that doesn't mean that they will give it to us, right? Which is the problem of the war. You know, you can only invade so many countries, it turns out, because you cannot afford to invade a lot of countries for oil, because it's expensive. They say that this is about a $3 trillion war now. They got about $100 billion a year, but they're saying the price tag's more like $3 trillion. Can't afford it, right? So that means that we have a society which is based on this oil, and is a society which cannot keep this level of consumption. And that means you gotta make some choices. So for instance, I don't know where your food comes from here. It sounds like you guys have some local food farm-to-school program, is that right? I'm very proud of you for that. And we need to have that replicated. I'm gonna talk a little bit about that, but you don't need much education on that, seems like. But vast majority of Americans, their food travels 1,546 miles from farmer to table. What does that mean in peak oil? What kind of food security do you have? How are you going to get those kiwis? Maybe the most important question. How are we going to get those kiwis, you know, over in Iowa? It's going to be tough. But maybe the bigger question is, should we be eating kiwis? You know, at what point do we eat more locally? Yeah? So you have the intersection of these issues, and then you have the question of what to do about it. I told you that I work on the White Earth Reservation, and I think you know that from my introduction. I'm a rural development economist. And my interest is, and I ask you to consider that because, I mean, the fact that you even have an urban development and sustainable development program here is remarkable. And that's good. You guys stick with that, keep it up. Because I'm telling you that in our community, there's not a lot of people that do rural development work either. People are not interested in looking at this question, or maybe it's just because there's not enough espresso machines in rural areas, I'm not sure. You know, because but the question is, what is the economy going to look like in the future? The community I work in is about 1,300 square miles. I don't know what that is equivalent down here, maybe the size of one of your counties, maybe? I don't know, 36 miles by 36 miles. Yeah. And that's my reservation. And I am interested in the question of who's going to control the future of that community and the future of our economy there. Now, we have a lot of statistics you don't want to have, but they exist here in LA. Half our people are at or below the poverty level. High rates of diabetes, about a third of our population has diabetes. We have arrest rates that are 7 times that of non-Indians, particularly if you're a young Native man between about 16 and 26. Your shot of being arrested is pretty high. We have high rates of violence, Indian on Indian violence. The village that I live near has the highest rate of, I think it's car burnings in the state. I don't really know why they burn the cars, but, so things you don't want to have, right? That's what I have. And so the question is, to me, is how you transform that and the issues that you look at in transforming. Now, I tell you this, I've been working on this for close to 30 years. Things are better now than they were before, and I feel good. I feel good. But I tell you that, I told you our statistics because it is important to let you know that people wouldn't bet on us getting our act together. That's why I told you that, because we're not considered to be the people who would have it together. But we looked around our community a while ago, in the early 80s, which was probably before you were all born. Was that right? Pretty much, yeah. In the early 80s, when I got out of college. We looked around and we said, well, we're not the richest, we're not the best looking, we're not the smartest, but we're the ones who live here. So rather than waiting for someone to fix it for us, which didn't seem to be a very plausible idea, having waited a long time, we decided we'd try to fix things ourselves. So instead of trying to deal with what I would consider to be the symptoms, we decided to look at the causes. So we began this organization called the White Earth Land Recovery Project. We fought through the courts to get back our land. Didn't succeed. We did get about 10,000 acres returned. But we also moved into looking at how to regain control over more of our economy. So we bought some land back. We have about 1,400 acres of land that we hold as a land trust. And on that, we grow some local organic food, including mostly heritage varieties of corn, and moving more into beans and squash varieties. And we have a maple syruping operation. We have a wild rice. Are you familiar with wild rice? Most of you, it grows on lakes. Harvest it with 2 sticks in a canoe. That's not the rice in California, that's how we harvest it though. And we have a wild rice processing mill, and then we bought a school a couple of years ago because they closed down schools in rural areas. And so this school was a typical story. They, in 2003, they won the No Child Left Behind Award. In 2004, they did $1.5 million in renovations in the school. In 2005, they closed the school. And in 2006, they sold the school to us for $250,000, right? After arguing with us about what we were going to do with the school. But, so we bought a school, and now we're putting up some wind turbines. That's what we're doing. And how does that look, on our plan and what we're after, and the implications? We decided to tackle, for instance, just food and energy in itself. And in our community, we found that not only were we unhealthy for what we ate, and it was, I think you are familiar with the term of food desert. You couldn't buy good food locally. You had to get it someplace else. But we did a study of our food economy and found that our people on our reservation, although a lot harvest wild rice and berries and meat, hunt a lot there, as I used to hunt up here in the hills of Pasadena. We spent about $8 million a year on food. And of that, we spent $9 million a year on food, and of that $8 million we spent off the reservation at Walmart or Food Service of America or whoever, yeah? And so, I don't know if you're familiar with this term, it's a multiplier, but that is to say that, in other words, if $1 comes into your reservation, it goes out immediately because you just spent the money on food. And that represents about 1/4 of our economy. In other words, the amount of money that you spend on food probably in your households, I'm not sure, is probably about 1/4 of your economy, and say you spend it someplace else, so it never circulates locally. Yeah?